So this is, for those of you who don't know, this is our send-off of President Huffman, and I'm delivering the Democratic remarks, and Senator McCauley will deliver the majority remarks. And my first thought was, when I was asked to do this, is why did he ask me? I mean, when I'm making floor speeches, nobody in this chamber looks less interested in my remarks than you do. But then I looked at my Democratic colleagues and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's why he asked me. And I think back to the other tribute speeches that we've heard, and they tell magnificent tales of bipartisanship. Kunze and Antonio literally building bridges across the state, Dolan and Seitz hammering out the state budget, DeMora and Hoagland making moonshine together. See? But we have no shared memories, and that's because I'm scared of you. You are Ohio's aspiring autocrat. But it's not just a goal for you, the kingdom is yours. You have dethroned the current Speaker of the House, Allison Russo. You control both chambers and every bill in every committee. Mike DeWine can only sign what you send him. My attitude in the Capitol was like being a member of the Rebel Alliance, hiding on the Death Star, trying to avoid stormtroopers and Darth Vader. I've been trying to avoid your glance for the last 2 years for fear of capture and certain death. But then I thought, perhaps I'm overreacting. We need, you and I, we need a shared experience. Perhaps we could carve a shared history through which we can work towards a common destiny. I just needed to find out more about you. Maybe it was within your hometown of Lima, Ohio, the home of Phyllis Diller, who, it needs to be said, nobody under the age of 65 knows who Phyllis Diller is. Lima, Ohio, where the TV show Glee is set. Lima, Ohio, the home of Queepy, the greatest hamburger on earth, with a pickle on top that makes your heart go flippity-flop. Those were the hamburgers you served us 2 years ago in January at the beginning of this General Assembly. And it needs to be said, those hamburgers were as cold as that January day. Perhaps you were more than just a frequent guest on John Fortney's daily podcast about John Fortney. I need to better understand why you would want to be the leader of about 87 House Republicans, which has got to be like loading up a wheelbarrow full of frogs and trying to convince them not to jump out of the wheelbarrow. I needed to learn more about Matt Huffman. So I scheduled a meeting with reliable Democratic vote Niraj Antani. But much like his committee schedule, he was a no-show for the meeting. Why would you, as president of the Ohio Senate, want to be a relatively unknown House GOP freshman in a windowless office? I was stumped. It was futile. I had no path forward with the man that the Reif Center will shortly be named after. But then it happened. An instant of shared history that I could use to forge a common future. It was an early fall day, and I was coming back from a tour of a utility-scale wind farm, of all things. I was traveling back to the Capitol, and I was stopped at a traffic light, and there at 2 o'clock out my car window, it was a Queepy hamburger restaurant. Queepy. That's it. I got out of traffic, parked, and ran inside, and I shouted at the counter staff, "Do you know Matt Huffman?" And they said, "Yes, He emptied out our entire freezer of stock in January 2023. And I said, he is my friend. And they looked at me like I was green. And I said, okay, I work with him. And they nodded. And I said, I must order your finest meal so I can share the culinary excellence of Lima's famous food, beloved by Lima's favorite son. And I did just that. I ordered and I dined. And to commemorate that moment and the beginning of a life-saving friendship for me, so that the life of this Senate court jester might be spared by the Capitol Square Emperor, I have a gift for you, Matt Huffman. It is a wrapped present. It is not in your desk because I figured you would have looked there. It's in Tim Schafer's desk. So Tim's going to walk it over to you now. I need you to open that. Yes. It says in my script, Emperor Huffman opens present. We used a lot of tape. Okay. All right, there it is. There. So that's me in front of the Queepy chain mascot. I've autographed it for you. You're welcome. Which is an absolutely terrible marketing idea. Let me suggest a mascot upgrade might be worth some capital budget dollars in the future. All that being said, and with that very lavish gift presented to you, I actually like you, Matt Huffman. I do. You want me to say that again? I actually like you, Matt Huffman. You are the most powerful person in state government, but I've also seen you be kind when you did not have to be, and while nobody was looking and your actions were out of sight. We have our policy disagreements. They are profound and substantial, but I have a genuine fondness for you because of the character I have seen you demonstrate when your actions were not going to be known. I hope that kindness will be your guide as you move across the rotunda. If your power is guided by kindness, then Ohio's best days are ahead of it, for you are the skipper of a ship containing 11.7 million souls. As John Maxwell said, quote, "The pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, the leader adjusts the sails," unquote. Godspeed and good luck as you leave this chamber, Mr. Speaker. Our state needs you at your best.
Thank you. And now for the majority party rebuttal to those remarks.
Somehow I didn't know that this was a debate, but okay.
Well, first, a disclaimer. For starters, my remarks will not be as funny as Senator Smith's because, as Matt Huffman likes to remark with relative routineness, nothing much is going to change in the Senate in the next General Assembly. The only big difference is that Senator McCulley's jokes won't be as funny as mine, which is probably true. But also, I would also like to make a disclaimer that all the nice things I'm about to say about Matt Huffman are revoked and void as of January 6th. Naturally, as they should in the ordinary course of things be. We also, I would agree with the terminology of send-off, because we're not bidding farewell to him. We're bidding him fair voyage across the rotunda to fix many of the things that we all agree may be needing of fixing here in the General Assembly. And we bid a send-off to a former Speaker Pro Tem, Senate Majority Leader, Senate Majority Whip. A lot of people forget you were the Majority Whip for about 2 months at one point. A former City Council President, but most importantly, we bid farewell to a friend and mentor to all of us, and even more importantly, an excellent father, an excellent husband, and an excellent grandfather. To learn more about Matt Huffman, you have to dig deeper, and you have to learn more about a variety of things. Chief among them are Lima, Ohio, Lawrence and Shelley Huffman, and Bill Batchelder. Three things that have had, and several people who have had a profound impact on molding Matt Huffman into the man that he is today. Let's start with Lima, Ohio, which of course has been talked about a little bit already. Lima, Ohio, an industrial giant at one point that has fallen on hard times in the past several decades, like many of our Midwestern cities. Home of Kewpie hamburgers, which, while you were criticizing Kewpie and mispronouncing Kewpie, I honestly thought Matt Huffman was going to run across this room. Those were fighting words in Allen County, sir. But despite all of this, for Matt Huffman, Lima, Ohio might as well be Mayberry. It's a place that he's called home. It's a place that he served on city council from 1992 to 2006, and as city council president there from 2000 to 2006. And in fact, we all know that Matt is very fond of sitting with us late at night or at dinner and conducting trivia. I have a little pro tip for you, having sat through many of those trivia sessions. If a question starts with, what Ohio city, it's a better than 50-50 chance the answer is Lima. So keep that in mind for future trivia sessions. But it's a place where Matt grew up and formed his own ideals as to family as one of the fifth of 9 children in the family that was raised by Lawrence and Shirley Huffman. The family, whereas the fifth of 9 children, Matt naturally had to learn to compromise as the middle child, as he's fond of reminding us. He also learned about his sense of humor from that family. And I also have to believe that he learned how to be an outgoing person, because as a middle child, especially with 9 kids, I would imagine, Mr. President, that you had to compete for attention among your brothers and sisters. I've always joked, as somebody who's outgoing, and he also is somebody who likes television shows, and he will routinely recite the jingles from various beginnings of television shows. There's a television show that when I think of Matt Huffman and many dinners that we've had to share with each other over the course of the time in the Senate that we've served with each other, Curb Your Enthusiasm, if anybody has heard it. There's an episode where Larry David talks about the importance of having a good middler at a dinner party, somebody who is going to sit at the middle of the table and guide the conversation and let people go to their various corners when they need to, but then bring everybody back together in a unified conversation among the entire table. Matt Huffman might be the best middler I've ever seen in my lifetime as somebody who's at dinner. He's a fond aficionado of karaoke, if you didn't know that. That's something he's probably toned down a little bit in his later years in the legislature for fear of that being discovered. He's somebody who also is a fond believer in trivia, to the point where I myself had to brush up at these dinners on all my 50 state capitals. I can recite all of them, and actually myself have begun doing that in long car rides, as I'm sure that the President Huffman did. Basically making sure that all of my kids have trivia contests regarding all 50 state capitals. There are worse things they can learn in a long car ride. But in Lima, Ohio, he learned, as I said earlier, the importance of family and the importance of service. And I think when you look at, for President Huffman, you look at the impact that his family had on him, and in particular, his father, Lawrence. His father, Lawrence, who is somebody who was a combat veteran in Korea, his father in the Marines, his father, Lawrence, who at one point was the Allen County prosecutor for 8 years, somebody who gave his life in service to this country and this state. And in fact, you don't have to really look all that far in President Huffman's office to look at a photo on the top of one of his shelves. And actually it says Huffman for prosecutor. And if you looked at the photo on first glance, you might say, Matt Huffman ran for prosecutor at one point, because the photo looks exactly like President Huffman. But indeed, it's actually his father, Lawrence, who ran for prosecutor years ago. And you can tell the impact that his father has had on him. And in fact, Matt likes to routinely remark about the fact that his father, like many lawyers do, worked until he was 89 years old in the law firm. We're saying, probably adopting the mindset of, what am I going to do, retire? What am I going to do in retirement? And so that should be a cautionary tale to everybody in this room who's thinking Matt Huffman will never be back in the Senate. I would say at some point he probably will be back in the Senate on his return trip. But also, I think, as for those of us who've come to know President Huffman through the legislative context, I think it's clear the impact that the great Bill Batchelder had on him. Bill Batchelder was a mentor to many. He was a thoughtful conservative. As a leader, he was somebody who made decisions, stuck with them, could set the tone for the entire chamber, but he was also somebody who was not afraid to delegate to the people in his caucus who could then take the load and carry the work through the finish line. Something that we have seen Matt emulate in his own service to us as president of the Ohio Senate. Many of us who had the chance to serve with Bill Batchelder have very fond memories of Bill Batchelder, and certainly Matt Huffman, as Bill Batchelder's right-hand man through many of those years, tasked with carrying much of those big projects through to the finish line. You can tell he gained a great deal of fondness and affection for Bill Batchelder and learned a great deal from Bill Batchelder. And so, as I am finishing up these comments, I would say that there are two compliments that I could give to Matt Huffman that I believe are two of the greatest compliments any one of us could give to him. As I mentioned before, many of us served with Bill Batchelder, but many of us also did not serve with Bill Batchelder. I did not serve with Bill Batchelder, but I can tell you that despite the fact that many of us in this room did, and for myself personally, I will say this: you, to many people, are their Bill Batchelder. You, to many people, are the person that we look to emulate our own styles and our own legislative careers. You have provided an example of a steady hand, somebody who has taken over in somewhat challenging times, and somebody who has really sought, ultimately, to leave the institution in a better spot than what it was when you came in. Matt Huffman, for me personally, has given me the opportunity to be able to take on an awful lot of heavy issues, to really be able to hone my own skills and do a good service, not just to the Ohio Senate, but to the people of Ohio. For that, I am incredibly grateful, and I hope that I have done as good of a job for you as you endeavored to do for Bill Batchelder. But the greatest compliment that I could give Matt is that he is an outstanding husband to his wife, Cheryl, and he is an outstanding father to his children, Claire, Matthew, Ellen, and Sam. I think for all of us who enjoyed the portrait ceremony the other night, this was on full display. The fact that he is absolutely adored by his family, not just his wife, but his children, his sons and daughters-in-law, and also his grandchildren. A proud moment for the Huffman family, and I think it was something that for the family really was important because, and the president referenced this in some respects in his remark, that he basically would be in some ways added to the history of this building, immortalized with a photo on the wall for generations to come, so that maybe his own grandchildren will bring their grandchildren or their children and say, that's your great-grandfather, or that's your great-great-grandfather. Because for Matt, it's always been, I believe, about building a legacy not for himself, but for his family. And his servant's heart has led him here to the state of Ohio because he believed the best way he could build for himself, for his family, a legacy would be through his service to make the state of Ohio a better place to live, work, and raise a family. I would say this: there are a number of things that I have hoped to emulate and that I have picked up along the way from President Huffman that I hope I can take into my own time as and my honor as being a leader of this chamber and his successor. One of the things that I hope I can look back on years from now is that I hope my kids will look at me as fondly as Matt Huffman's kids look at him. But I also look forward to having conversations later on in life with my kids and my grandkids to say that I had the great honor and privilege of serving with and for President Matt Huffman. We bid you send off across the rotunda, and as a reminder, none of this means anything on January 6th. Thank you.
Are you standing now because you don't want me to speak? Because
You have to be called on.
oh, sorry, Leader Antonio. Sorry.
And now we will hear from himself, President Huffman.
Well, thank you very much, Leader Antonio. You get up on that dais, and all of a sudden, right, it's all
right.
comes in for you. Thanks very much, everyone. And to clear up any mystery about why I asked Senator Smith to do this is because I knew it would be funny, and that's really important to me. Having a good laugh. This is just extra credit. So this will be on. I can't read your handwriting, but the rest of it, it's delightful that you would make the effort to do that. And Senator McCauley, he really, and I've said this on a variety of occasions. There are, I ended up doing a lot of things for Speaker Batchelder, and I start to think back about all the things that ended up in Senator McCauley's lap. From windmills to the governor's emergency orders to gas pipelines and on and on and on. And, every legislator gets to pick their own path, whether they want to take on lots of big projects or be an expert in a specific area. But there's not very many people, I mentioned this about Bill Seitz last night, who have that breadth and depth of knowledge that Rob McCauley has. I wanted to, as I began thinking about remarks, and I was walking around my house looking for the lawyer's 8.5 by 11 legal pad that we always use, and I couldn't find one, but then I found this box of cards. People of my age remember that we used to write our speeches on index cards, right? Does anybody remember that? Steve Wilson does, maybe. And these all say Senator Matt Huffman on them, so I'm like, well, I can't use these anymore anyway, so I might as well just go ahead and use these. Rob mentioned my dad. I haven't just been here the last 4 years. I've been in the Senate for 8 years. When I came in, and since then, both my parents have passed away. But to counterbalance that, Cheryl and I have had 10 grandchildren. So altogether, it's been a good 8 years. But that's how much life changes. When I was sworn in January of 2021, some of you weren't here, but Cheryl mentioned this last night. I was actually on the front porch of my house. I tested positive for COVID, and I'm not sure what kind of headline that would have come if I just showed up anyway. It turns out that the best way to not get COVID is just don't test yourself for it, which is what I did after that. So my doctor, Steve Huffman, told me that was okay to do that. So thanks, Steve. He's not practicing medicine anymore, I don't think. But I've had two governors here, both Governor Kasich, who once looked at me and said, "Come on, Matt, you know what I'm doing. Come on, just get these knuckleheads wrapped up. Come on, And I didn't really know what that meant. I still don't know what it means, but I knew he meant it sincerely. Mike DeWine, whenever we get into serious conversations in the governor's office, he'd ultimately sort of go to, I just want to do what's good for Ohio, like that. And I didn't really know what that meant either, but as I walked out the room, John Barron or someone explained, well, here's what he's going to do. So both a couple of good eggs that I enjoyed working with. I've had a lot of aides in the last 8 years. Some of them are no longer in the state of Ohio, but I wanted to mention them all. Lissa Beadle, Ian Dolan-Mayer, Laura Martini, but she's married now, I know. Isaac Northrup, the famous Chrissy Wright, which I was very lucky to have for about 6 months. Richard Gonzalez, Hannah Kramer, and for the last 4 years, Adam Polabel, who during that time has been in law school, has shared a lot. We've talked a lot about what has happened in law school. He's has his federal jurisdiction class, which in that case book is a case called Huffman versus Pursue Limited. It's a case that my dad took to the U.S. Supreme Court, won the case. What it was about is actually not very interesting, but so I won't go into it. But I sort of had this running joke with Adam. You know, we try to schedule meetings every 20 minutes or every half an hour, see as many people as we can. And every once in a while, right, you know, near the end of the meeting, Adam would knock on the door like that and walk in and say, "Your next meeting is here." And sometimes we had 6 or 7 meetings in a row, and it was, he'd knock on the door the same number of times, wait the same amount of time, open it up, and say it in the exact same voice. And it's like that scene in Airplane where Leslie Nielsen opens the door and says, "Good luck, we're all counting on you." It kept happening over and over. And I explained that to him once, and he didn't smile, because it's really hard to get Adam to smile, because he is a serious academic, serious about his work. Nothing is going to go wrong. So every once in a while, I get Adam Polable to smile. The first time was when we began talking about the fact that Adam's dad is a member of the great Lima Central Catholic High School class of 1978. So I graduated with Adam's dad from high school. So we talked about the Thunderbirds. That usually made him smile. But Adam has a brilliant mind. I think and I hope he's going to continue on here in the Senate in a different role. But what you've been able to do for me in the last 4 years, I'm not going to forget that, Adam. Looking forward to you to being part of the Bar Association. I think I had a great relationship with Leader Antonio and Leader Yuko as Senate President. Sometimes when people would ask me, you know, and our great friends in the Fourth Estate would ask me these questions about what's going on, and does the other side know, and do the Democrats in the House really like you, and what, you know, on and on. All these things come together, and I say, look, if you think I'm a tyrant, if you think it always has to be my way, go ask Nikki Antonio, go ask Kenny Yuko. And I didn't tell them you're going to call them. Now, I don't really know what Nikki told them or what Kenny told them. But the point is that a great working relationship with the minority. And as Ken said, it's not things that you always have to do, but it's things that in a civil society, if you want an institution to work, you always grant requests to folks who ask them. All 32 members of this body, because they were elected to come here and represent people. So it's part of the job, I think, of a legislative leader to accommodate as many things as you possibly can, even if you don't have to. So I really enjoyed working with Kenny and Nikki. I had some great lawyers, as you need to have. I think I've been sued, we probably could count it up, but it's probably 20, 25 times by a whole variety of folks. I had some process server served me with a subpoena to show up for my deposition. That's something that lawyers do, not good lawyers, but lawyers do to scare somebody. They take the subpoena to their house or their place of employment. So the folks who were suing me in this particular case had a guy show. I felt bad for the process server because I asked him a bunch of questions he didn't know the answer to. But through all of that, through the redistricting lawsuits, through the Ed Choice scholarship lawsuits, and all the other ones that we had, I had this set of lawyers locally. First, Don Parsons and Frank Strigari, who were, when Frank left, I truly missed the DeRossi, Strigari, Italian guys yelling at each other session, which happened all the time in my office. And, but they were replaced, I think I can say replaced, by Will Cox and Matt Oyster, who are absolutely brilliant, hardworking guys that it's good to have lawyers. So, and I'm not just saying that because I am one. Everybody should have them. Our policy people, Goran, George, Melissa, Marcus. I'm going to put Ray and David in the category of policy, even though they were, for some reason, you got to have the budget guys right outside the president's office, because Ray wants to be able to open my door and listen to what people are saying. Like, nope, not going to do that, not going to do that. And then later on, he comes and tells me what my private conversation was about. But all those people are brilliant. The amount of time and effort and what they can keep in there, because they're not just thinking about the 3 or 4 bills that we all work on. They have dozens of things, dozens of amendments that they have to, each of those individually with all the things they do. Regan and Averill, Averil's been with me since my days in the House, have had a whole variety of activities, a lot of the outside planning and things that you all see doing. Regan, the scheduler, I'm not sure how she is able to keep up with the changes, because I've always like, can you move this one back 15 minutes and the other one up 20, and then put that guy in the afternoon and all of that. And I don't think she was ever in a bad mood in the whole time. 4 years she worked for me. She was always pleasant, always smiling. I can't say that about the 2 Italian guys who were always yelling at each other, but I can't say that about Regan. She was fantastic. Now, we have this, and a lot of senators don't have a whole lot of interaction with our tech people, okay? Clint Moorfield is the guy I interacted with when I did. Occasionally someone would attack my phone and I'd have these terrible things, and Clinton would take care of it. And he has the other fellows, Ken, Jimmy, and Charles, who work for him. They're all pretty mysterious. Like, they all kind of travel in a crowd. If they all come out of the room at the same time, and they all go back in their basement room at the same time, and I don't know, they're like the guys on the bottom level of the Starship Enterprise, right? And if you go into their office, they've got Star Trek stuff all over the place. So I don't really know what they do or how they download stuff on the phone or computers and all that. But if they're Star Trek fans, they must know what they're doing when it comes to technology. So I thank them for making sure the board always lights up. John Fortney had a bunch of wonderful communication people who are working for them. And he kept coming in and giving me more names, and I kept writing them all down. So they're here. Garth and Teresa, Millie, Carrie, Beth. I miss Beth Ford. She's not here with us. Tom Evans, Dan Lushik, a couple guys who aren't here. John came to me with this idea of we're going to have our own online newspaper. And I didn't really know what that meant, because I don't read any other online newspapers. I have to have a piece of paper to read news. But as he began talking about this, I said, yeah, it sounds great. And he came up with this idea of the President's Podcast. Many of you have been on that. And I know it works because friends of mine, my daughters in Pensacola and Bethesda, other people say, yeah, we watch it all the time. And there were some folks in the media who were a little bit chagrined, like, how could you do this, use these resources to do this? Well, the answer was we were just doing what we'd been doing for years, sending out newsletters and things like that. In this case, we were just doing a lot better job of getting the word out. And so John this is really a cutting edge thing, I think, for legislators. John actually he did call it his Death Star. And so one day I gave him the British accent. You may launch your invasion now, Lord Vader. And he has gone ahead and done that. So Liz Connolly is the most brilliant mind in state government. And that's not just because she worked for me and has worked for the Senate for a long time. To see her every day in the office, especially during these lame duck times, but also at budget time and many other times, she's juggling, 10 bills at once. And rather than say, I don't have time to talk to you when a senator comes in or when an advocate calls or anything like that, she just says, throw it right in here. And so now she's doing 11, now she's doing 12. It's almost like it's a competitive sport for her, And I don't say that she's the most brilliant mind because she can do all of those things. It's because she gets every cultural reference that I make. If I say something about Hogan's Heroes, she knew that John Boehner played Sergeant Schultz. If I say something about Spiral Staircase, she knew what their hit song was, right? I can't remember what day it was. And I would sing, and then she'd get the second line. So most of you didn't get a chance to see Liz dance, but I did. And it's impressive, it really is. But everything of 60s and 70s, she was my cultural barometer, because there weren't very many of us, or there are fewer of us than there used to be. So what a pleasure being able to work with her for 8 years, but certainly these last 4. John Barron is, and I think I've said this a few times before, he's the big, tall guidance counselor to all of us. He's the guy who calms everybody down, says, yeah, let's come in. We're going to, I know the president said that, but he didn't really mean it that way. You're going to come in and sit down and talk. And you'd walk out of your office and you're like, well, I'm still unhappy with what happened, but I sure feel a lot better, you know? And he learned the tactic of the facial no. Okay, he didn't say no. He didn't go, but he'd look at you and go, I'll give you one of those. Like that. And it was always in as Liz used to say to me when I had a bad idea, she'd say, maybe you're not having a very good day today, or something like that. That's how I knew it. But John would be able to do it. And I will tell you, in a time that had to be the most difficult time in anybody's life, John seemed to never break stride. And that's really tough to do, as you all know. But he was a great mentor to me, John, and I really appreciate that. So before this turns into what I did last night, I will say this to all of the senators here. I have a lot of personal messages to each of us. Of course, it's great being here with Steve. Known him since, he was a little kid, shorter than me, believe it or not. But most of you will still be here. I know Vern, of course. We were in the House together and the Senate together. I came in with Stephanie and Matt, and in the House and in the Senate. But over the next month or so, I'd like to try to reach out to each of you individually and talk about some of the things. Now, some of that may be, well, I'm over there in the House, but also we can always have lunch and everything else, right? In your district, as we like to say. Lawyers like me from the Midwest, small town lawyers, end up, our hero's Abraham Lincoln, because Lincoln did what we did. He practiced law in a small town. He rode a horse, but we drive cars around all the county seats in Mercer County and Putnam County. Sometimes go down to the big city of Cincinnati and have an argument down there. I try to avoid Cuyahoga County at all costs. I was there once, never want to go back. Sorry, Matt. I mean, the judges, love the Guardians, great baseball team. And I had a couple arguments in the Supreme Court, but we try to emulate Lincoln. And Lincoln, as a young legislator in Illinois, was kind of an interesting character. I mean, he was respected, but he was part of a caucus of bomb throwers called the Long Nine. And a lot of people just, some took him very seriously, some took him as a leader, but he grew certainly as a legislator, was in Congress briefly, but as we know, lost most of his elections. He lost many more times than he won. And it was kind of an accident, really, that he received the nomination for the Republican Party in 1960. It helped that the convention was in Chicago, but the other leading candidates, this is a good example to all of you, hated each other so much that they were going to vote for anybody but that guy, and Lincoln ended up being the guy who emerged. Well, at that point, what is this small-town lawyer who had a not-so-great record of success going to do with all of these great personalities? And if you read Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, you can talk about how he tried to, and he was successfully able to get all of these people at the table, his former opponents. But the question is, why would they listen to him? So I want to read you this passage. It's from a book by Michael Burlingame, and he's talking about Lincoln. And he says, in some men, the painful questioning that often occurs at middle life can lead to despair. In others, it produces stagnation. But it can also be a creative, if turbulent, period during which inner psychological growth takes place and leads to profound maturity. Out of the crucible of midlife, introspection can encourage an awareness of our own identity and uniqueness that becomes self-confidence and inspires confidence in others. A hallmark of such psychological progress is the ability to overcome egotism, to avoid taking things personally, to accept one's shortcomings and those of others with equanimity, and to let go of things appropriate for youth and accept gladly the advantages and disadvantages of age. Lincoln was able to meet those challenges successfully, radiate a kind of psychological wholeness and rootedness that commands respect. And, well, folks, I'm no Abraham Lincoln, but I will tell you those are things that I try to do, and that is overcome egotism. I'm doing the best I can, Ken, okay? Avoid taking things personally, and accept one's shortcomings and those of others with equanimity. If we can all do that, if we can all be a little bit more like Lincoln, I think this institution will be a better place. Thank you very much, Leader Antonio. Thank you, everybody.